Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery podcast are proud to bring you Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast. Join your hosts, Mike the Podfather and Jersey Ed, as they address the real issues in health and wellness for first responders, from physical and mental health to relationships and work-life balance. We leave no stone unturned. Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your friends in recovery answering the call.
Yep.
Welcome to another episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast, sponsored by Genesis House and produced by Sweets Productions in Beverly, Mass. And now, here are your hosts, the Podfather Mike Miles and Jersey Ed.
Hey, thank you, Sweets. As always, we are happy to be here, ready and available to help our first responders out there across the country and abroad.
That's right, Mike. I love learning about all these new topics, and so do our listeners. I can tell from all the emails and social media chatter that we get all the time.
Yes, we do. We do get quite a bit of chatter, don't we?
I'm constantly on that email answering everybody. Good Lord.
Well,
all the Podfather
right.
requests that they want pictures and hair lock. Well, you have no hair, so.
Right? Yeah. That's the kettle calling the pot black, I think, isn't it?
Right. Well, I think there's only one person in his room right now that has any somewhat of hair.
He's a good-looking man with a head of hair.
Not one
right.
to boast, but yeah.
So you stuck around for another week, huh, Tom?
I did.
So what's Boise going to do without you for another
Introduce
week?
Tom.
You know, they'll be all right.
They'll be all right. Good. So, Tom, tell us who you are. And
Yeah.
if people didn't watch our last podcast, which was
Thomas Burruel.
Thomas Burruel, yes.
Absolutely. I'm the co-founder of a company called Intervention 180. We're an intervention firm that's based out of Boise, Idaho. We help folks that are struggling with substance abuse, addiction, mental health, just kind of that whole spectrum. And we definitely have a heart for our first responders.
Absolutely. Sweets, that's competition for you, my man.
It is not competition. So the deal is
Absolutely
that
not.
there are enough people out there. What do we
More.
got? 20% of the American population struggling with substance use,
I
and
know.
all of their families. So
Yeah.
we
You
deal
imagine.
we deal with
100%.
we deal with the other 80%, and I'm pretty sure, Tom, that we're never going to bump into each other unless we actually call each other.
The truth of the matter is we need more help. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
just the reality is that we're still lacking in resources.
Well, you know what? Here it proves that we're all on one show. You guys are doing the same thing, and everybody's helping each other out. There's no. We can't have foes or not foes, but we can't have enemies in this field. We have to help each other out, and just like Genesis House, we're not for everybody. Genesis House isn't the right fit for every police officer, every first responder. Just like you guys, Tom might have a different approach, and it might be the right approach. Mike might have a different approach, and so there's what's the saying? There's a screw for every nut. Isn't that what the saying is out there?
Yeah, something like that. There's a washer for every nut.
Yeah, exactly.
And a bolt.
Yeah, exactly.
And a bolt.
There's a bunch of nuts in this room today. So,
Sure. No, I think our last show was pretty good. We talked to Dr. Anderson down in D.C.
Yeah, that was last
and,
week's show. Yep.
She was so enlightening, so intuitive and full of knowledge, and just her approach to working with, listening to her, it was soothing for me. As a guy that had to get help on his own, it was hard to find any help. I remember being in the emergency room, and I had taken some cocaine, and I was just in a rough place before I went away for treatment. And a doctor came over to me, and he said, he was from Israel. He was an Israeli doctor studying here, and he chastised me for being, a cop with a drug problem, and I should be ashamed of myself. And I believed every word he said, because I was totally ashamed of myself. But thank God I didn't listen to him. Thank God I went and got the help. I did find some help.
Yeah.
And if you're out there and you're struggling, and you're living day to day with an addiction, it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
It won't get better on its own.
No,
it won't go away.
Yeah, and you guys who are listening in the squad cars and maybe sitting at the firehouse waiting for the next call or the ambulance, or maybe you're at home listening to this. You can reach out and talk to one of us and just kind of, or anybody, even Dr. Anderson. I mean, we're a week later from this show, and that show really impacted a lot of us. The emails I was getting and all the information that everybody wanted on Dr. Anderson was amazing. And we just decided that not to have a guest this week and really talk about what Dr. Anderson was talking about, because this is for you guys out there, so you guys can get the help and kind of bring it into your life and live that good and clean, sober life. Not even a good, clean, sober life, just a healthy life. As Beverly was saying, and let's get you back on track again.
Maybe booze or drugs are not your your problem. Maybe you have a problem with gambling. Maybe you have a problem with infidelity. Maybe you have a problem with just being hyperactive and not being able to stop your mind from racing. And I've seen it. I've sat with so many police officers with all kinds of hypertension and feelings of remorse because they went to a call and they weren't able to save the life of somebody, or a fireman. There was a fire in Lowell, Massachusetts 7 years ago, and it was right next door, literally right next door to a fire station, and it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning, and 5 people died in that fire, 3 children, 2 family members, and it was a horrific, horrific fire. And these firemen that went to this, they literally were right next door. They came out. They didn't even have time to. As soon as they walked out the door, they were at the fire. And these people died. And people were saying in the paper, there's an article in the paper they write. You can call and make complaints. And people were complaining. The firemen were right next door. Why did it take so long? And it didn't take long. It was just that the fire was engulfed the building so quickly. But the guilt, the remorse, that these firemen had was horrific. And I just feel like sometimes, no matter what you've done in your career, you're going to come across an incident where you're not going to be able to provide the help you wish you could. And unfortunately, people do die in car accidents. They do drown. They do perish in fires. Oh, you pick the scene, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not your fault.
No, it's not. And that brings up the topic of Sweets. What was it?
Well, just the humanization and kind of personalizing these folks that they're going out and experiencing these horrific traumas on a regular basis. And Dr. Anderson was talking about the difference between surviving these things and thriving within it. Trying to find a healthy way to self-soothe and to not get caught up in whatever you're using to deal with those incidents.
Yeah, and I like that topic because at Genesis House we have a track and not a program for the first responders, and we want them to be dads and moms and husbands and wives. We want to fix that piece also, and we understand what they do as first responders too. So there is their professional job, which sometimes these guys are 24/7, but there's also the human side of this. There's the the human side that they have to go and go back home. And we were even speaking on the last show, when we come home, when your first responders come home, you don't want to talk about, oh honey, how was your day at work today? Well, I seen a dead baby. I put out a fire that killed 4 people, and there was a shootout and one of the officers got shot. Who the fuck wants to say that, especially to your spouse? And she's going to say it's going to be okay. No, it's not going to be okay. This will not be okay when you see shit like that. It gets in you. It gets in your psyche. It's put into your brain and put back somewhere. And you guys crush it down and put it away and don't talk about it. And when shit hits the fan and it explodes, I think the gentleman a couple of weeks ago was saying what was it? The checkpoint.
Yeah.
He said that these Tupperware bowls come out and they spill out all over the place, and then now you got to pick that shit back up again and try to make yourself look like you're okay, and you're not.
You're not supposed to become desensitized to it, which I think was the topic, that it's not supposed to become normal. I think Mike, you had mentioned that the what'd you call it, the morbid sense of humor that gets developed when you see all that on a regular basis, that you almost feel like I'm supposed to be okay with this. Nobody's supposed to be okay with this.
No.
And even if you have kids, you might have children that have problems, and I've worked with many cops that I actually have 5 close friends, 5 of them, 5 police officers that lost their sons in 5 years to drug addiction. And, as the EAP, and these were close friends, they just weren't acquaintances. It was very difficult to go house to house to house, wake to wake, funeral after funeral, and being part of it. But this is what this epidemic of this opioid epidemic has done to society, And, you compound all these stressful events and all these incidents where, you see things that most people are never going to see and don't understand. And, and then you move on to the next call and you act like it's just, it's just part of the job, which it is. But unfortunately, that stuff builds up, and after a while, it can get to be too heavy, and you have to dump it. Tom, you do some very interesting work, and it was really a pleasure meeting you last week. And tell us a little bit about what you do and how you see what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Well, first off, I've been doing interventions for about 16 years now. I co-founded this company 12 years ago, Intervention 180. And like I mentioned earlier in the intro, was that we have a heart for working with our first responders. But to build kind of off of what Beverly said last week, in terms of, that there is no RoboCop. There is no cop that kind of leaves unscathed, right? And I think that how we see our law enforcement or even our first responders is that they compartmentalize, which she also noted as a skill set. Mm-hmm. It really is. Yeah. It truly is. But it's that compartmentalizing and then stuffing, right? And we stuff and continue to stuff until ultimately what happens is we see it starts to present itself coming out sideways. And when we refer to that, it's sometimes it's feeling the tightness in the chest, shortness of breath, even low back pain. Sometimes they're thinking, oh, this low back pain is because I injured myself. But really, you're having somatic pain as a result of stuffing these emotional feelings over time. And so we go to a doctor thinking, oh, I strained my back because it was a gym or I was at the, I was working out.
Sitting in my cruiser all day long, all that. Yeah,
exactly. Or even the tightness in the chest or, oh, I think I have heartburn, and really they're having, problems with their blood pressure and everything else and the anxiety. And so we find ourselves reaching for something in an effort to numb out just a little bit, right? And it works. And so because it works, we continue that. And then that cycle, it progressively gets worse. Left unchecked, what we know is left unchecked, mental health or stressors, when we continue to medicate, it progressively gets worse. We don't change the situation. And I think the thing that Beverly really struck me, she was, what a great person to have on the show. I mean, so passionate and knowledgeable. What a great resource she is to the law enforcement in the D.C. area.
That's true.
But what I would like is more law enforcement folks to really have the opportunity to
have a Beverly Anderson.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And not just that, but to also have the resources that they provide in terms of being able to educate and be a part of the post academy, for those new officers, things like that. Yeah. I really, it would be great. Hopefully one day we can have it be a national program.
Well, and I think that could start with everybody out there listening, from every first responder, police officer, firefighter, get out there and talk to some of your folks. Get out and talk to, you guys got peer-to-peers. A lot of first responders have peer-to-peers. Talk to those peer-to-peers. There might be somewhat of a program out there, and if not, take the initiative and figure out. Let's start a peer-to-peer program. Even the healthy guys out there who are listening to this, or maybe somebody in recovery, or somebody went through some stress, or maybe suicide. Talk to your chief or talk to the administration and say, listen, this can help our guys. This can help. Help those guys who are suffering. I was suffering, like Mike. You were suffering all those years ago. What did you do? You started an EAP program in Lowell. Is that correct? I mean, that's what you did after you got help. Yep. You ended up starting an EAP program and running with it.
I found a place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1987, and it was cops helping cops. And I flew down my own money, myself and a friend of mine, Tom Fleming, and he was a police officer as well. No substance abuse problem, but he had his own issues going on. And we went to this seminar, and they asked me to speak on behalf of my addiction. I had been sober about 2 years, and it was a room full of huge police officers. These Pittsburgh cops were some big boys, They look like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And
Iron Curtain.
At the time, the chief's name was Chief Mayor, the mayor of the city. And Chief Mayor was this big, burly cop. His hands were the size of a canned ham. And he come up to me, and he had watery eyes at the end. And I didn't even know what I said. I spoke, through the great. You know how it is when you're in AA, they ask you to speak, and you just get up there, But I spoke about my gratitude for being able to maintain and keep my job. And he said, you know what, you're gonna be all right. He says, boy, you got a powerful story. He said, I wish some of my guys, would be able to get some help. And months later, I got a call from the attorney for the union down there. And there was a cop, his name was Harmon Drummond. And Harmon Drummond he was a young officer. And he got caught taking drugs out of the drug locker. They had him on camera. And instead of firing him, this chief remembered me speaking. And he told the attorney for the union, call this guy and see if he'd be willing to talk to Harmon.
Wow.
And also, I want to know if this kid Miles is still on the job, which I was. And my chief called him, said, yep, we gave him a second chance, and things are going well. So Harmon Drummond ends up keeping his job. So if just one act, if I never did another thing in my career, I helped the cop save his job. And that made me realize that day, right there, 88, that I was useful with this. And that's when I decided to get an education and continue and just to be able to spread the word.
Mike, last week, you shared on the podcast and just your recovery and everything. I just want to take a minute and say thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being one of those in the 80s to step out and be courageous. I mean, it really does take courage for our guys to be able to admit that they need help.
Sure.
And as I know how difficult it is right now in today's society and culture for law enforcement to reach out, and I can't imagine what it was in the 80s.
Yeah, it was a little different. What's amazing is when you were talking, excuse me, Tom, when you were speaking, I was thinking about, I just saw a protest, and I'm pretty sure it was in D.C., or maybe it was New York, but there was a bunch of cops in riot gear confronting a crowd of radical protesters, and these were professional protesters. These just weren't people with signs with a problem. These were in your face, spitting, throwing cups of urine, throwing rocks and bottles, and these cops had to stand there and just with shields, but still, when you have somebody 6 inches away from your face, screaming with rage in their eyes and their veins are sticking out, you get heightened. You can't help it. Your adrenaline flows. Yeah. And I just thought how much restraint it took for these cops not to just take charge and start locking some of these people up, which eventually they did. There was like 33 arrests, I believe, and of course the media. What did they do? The cops used pepper spray. These poor kids were just, exercising their Fifth Amendment right. They were just, protesting, which is bullshit. They weren't just protesting. They were inciting a riot.
Mike, I ran into that. I was in Philly, I think it was over the summer, by the convention hall. And there was a protest going on. Here's the bitch part of this, okay? These cops had to stand there and protect these guys who were slandering the cops in front of the convention hall, screaming and yelling, signs, megaphones, putting down cops, and there was a bunch of cops around them protecting them. Like, what? I don't understand that. I mean, so now you have to go and protect these guys, and now you go home and say, well, what the fuck? I mean, what is society coming to? Guys, real quick, we got to take a break. We'll be right back after these words.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. The First Responder Recovery Program at Genesis House is led by a doctorate-level therapist with direct professional experience as a first responder himself. Treatment modalities focus on psychiatric care, relapse prevention, stress management, and trauma-informed care for PTSD. Learn why their individualized approach makes a difference for first responders. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Friends in Recovery Podcast. Answering the call. I'm here with Jersey Ed.
Yes, sir.
And I am Mike the Podfather.
You
Miles. And we have Tom
Burruel
Burruel with us.
From Idaho. Idaho is not the same. He's been gone for a week. We got to get him back.
I love Idaho. When I buy potatoes, I only buy Idaho. Tom. I just want you to know.
So listen, I want it to be known, we're based in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, Boise.
Yeah. So having said that, somebody goes, no, where do you live? I said, I get my mail in Boise. They go, no, but where do you live? I said, at a Hampton Inn near you. So we come
Sweets
to you
understands that one.
when you're in distress, when
We're
your
there,
family's
right?
in crises, and especially for our first responders, you guys are, get to that point where you want off that emotional roller coaster, and you can't contain it. Like for me, I knew that there was that point in time where we have that saying of being carried off by the weight of our own misery, and I think that's that's what happens, and I just applaud those that are able to identify that they're in need of help and they reach out before someone says, hey, you've got a problem.
Yeah. And that load it's taken off of them when they do reach out and say, I need help, and you guys can probably see it in interventions. I can hear it on the telephone when a first responder or even a civilian says, yeah, I'm gonna get help. I mean, there's a difference in their tone of voice. There's a calmness about them. They're not fighting anymore. It's just completely different than what they were trying to do beforehand. And I guess you guys, as interventionists, see that too. I mean, when the breakdown is going to happen, and then it goes the way it's supposed to.
It's a physical response. I mean, Tom, you can attest to this, that when you're in the room with somebody and they finally accept that it's happening and they're ready for help, you can actually see the shoulders drop. They take a deep breath. Yep. They sit forward. They start to ask questions. I mean, it is like someone pulled a 5,000-pound weight off their shoulders for a second.
100%.
And
usually what happens is the pain has to become greater, right? And our pain has to become greater than our fear of change. And
one of my favorite quotes.
And for me, physical pain, I could take that. I could handle that.
Absolutely.
I welcomed it at times in my life. Yeah. It was a pleasant distraction from the emotional pain.
Yeah. And even Beverly, she was saying last week, and I know we're quoting her show. Her show a lot, but she was even saying that these guys are screened for, or maybe one of us were saying it, but they're screened to be physically okay, and they can take pain and they can take all that, but emotional pain is tough to take, but it's so easy to jam away and just get rid of it and hide it.
Well, the thing about emotional pain is it's that wild card. It's that variable. It's what helps me, when I think of algebra, solving for x, I was like, what the hell's that? But physical pain is the one plus, and then the algebra is the emotional pain. 1 plus x equal, that's that variable that I could never predict when it was going to show up. I couldn't predict when it was going to show up. I couldn't predict how long it was going to stick around either. And so, and then over time with me, it was like it became, it showed up more frequently. So I began to use more frequently, and then it showed up for longer periods of time.
Yep.
So I found myself doing it longer than I wanted to.
And I like what you said last week, Tom, too, about 1,000 paper cuts. That was pretty powerful, because you guys out there now who are listening, you do take those paper cuts and you keep taking them, and eventually it becomes a big deep wound and gash, and you try to put a Band-Aid on it or hide it. And I'm talking emotionally, not a physical paper cut, but that was a good analogy. And you just keep taking them, and you don't have to. You can talk to people about things, and suicide and whatever it is. Don't be afraid to reach out, like we were saying earlier, to a peer person. A Beverly Anderson, she's always available. Mike's always, we're always available. Sweets, or everybody's here to kind of help you guys out. That's why we started this podcast, is to help you guys, not just the addiction piece. All of us in this room are well versed on addiction. We probably can write 10 books. We can probably write, here's an old word, an encyclopedia, volume of encyclopedia on addiction. But when it comes to the emotional pain, I wouldn't want to fucking write a word on that, you know what I mean? So, but you guys can reach out. And listen, the program that I work, it does teach me, that I have to get into my emotional piece. I've been 25 years. I'm 25 years sober, but there are things that pop up, and if I don't talk about my emotional pain and problems that I have and things that are going on in my life, I don't know where I'd be. I don't think I would pick up a drink, but it would lead me to deeper and darker places that I don't need to be or don't want to go to. And we don't have to be there. So you guys listening, you don't have to be there. Reach out to one of these guys and don't be in that deep dark place that you're sitting in right now.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be addiction. It can be anything. It can just be just insurmountable, guilt. Your bills aren't being paid. You have all kinds of other problems. Mental health concerns, depression. Depression is the common cold to cops because you know what? Beverly said it last week. We're not getting phone calls saying, "Hey, come on over. We're having a cookout, and we're going to make you a nice cheeseburger. You're going to sit down and you're going to relax, put your feet up, and we're going to just have some laughs." We get calls. I was a cop 35 years, 28 on the street. The type of calls I got, I never knew what I was getting. Some of them were just, minute. There were neighbor problems or small things, and some of them were serious. Somebody committed suicide. Somebody was fighting. Somebody got hurt. I saw a guy one time, he came out holding his left side of his head, and when he moved his hand, his ear was gone. His roommate had taken an entrenching tool, an army shovel, and he had whacked him in the head and cut his ear off with it. And, just to see that, I was thinking it's in slow motion. Is that going to be able to be sewn back on, number one? And the guy said, "Is it bad?" He had no idea his ear was gone. I said, "Well, if we find your ear, I think, we're going to take you to the hospital." He had no idea his ear was even off, and you can never, some people just stuff it, other people use substances to mask it and hide it or to get away from the pain. But some guys just stuff it. Some girls just stuff it. They don't necessarily pick up a drink or a drug. But it doesn't mean they don't need someone to talk to. And, if your department doesn't offer peer counseling or peer support, or if they don't have a CISM team, critical incident stress debriefing, if they don't have a team that, you can help, pick up the phone, go on, Google it. Google police helping police. You'll find many organizations.
But Beverly was talking about Copline.
Copline, yeah.
Just Google Copline, and that phone number is there. They are cops that answer the call 24 hours a day. They're there, ready to help. The other thing too, and Mike, I know you do this, but I know I work with Boston PD, I work with Chicago PD, some of the larger PDs, and some of the state troopers too reach out to me that they have a guy from a local police department that called for help. And they found their number, or they heard of their program, their EAP or EAS or EAU program, and they reached out to a larger. You might be some sheriff's office in Des Moines, Idaho, and or wherever, some little town that has three guys that are everybody's laughing at me.
I think it's Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines,
sorry.
I know we got Idaho here, but
there. Sorry. Yeah, just sorry.
But anyways, what I'm saying is that you got some little town that reach out to the bigger towns who have these programs. And reach out for help. Call those guys.
What we're trying to say is there's help out there. Don't think there's not. Your problems aren't unique. You might think they're unique. Yeah. You might think you're unique. You're not. You're one of many. And, many before you, many after you are going to go through the same thing. If you got people that love you, people you care about, think of them. Let me just tell you this about suicide. This is a stat that just knocked me on my ass because I thought of suicide years ago. And I'm so glad, obviously, I'm here, but I was pretty close to it. And you know what? It was a calming, scary place to be because I hadn't felt that calm and relaxed in years, literally in 2 years. But when I decided to get the help I wanted, and I called a friend of mine to come over my house at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a relief knowing that I was getting help. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, and to this day I don't even know how he hooked it up to bring me to a treatment facility up in New Hampshire at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's what he did. Whether there are plenty of available outlets. It's not like it used to be.
No.
And confidentiality, you're afraid of losing your job. Listen, that won't happen if you do it properly.
Right.
And on the stat on suicide, this is it. If you commit suicide and you have a child or someone who loves you and you're involved with, do you know their chances of doing the exact same thing just rose 30%?
Wow.
30%.
Wow.
That's such a scary stat. And I talked to a guy out of a window ledge one night. He was in a windowsill, second story. I can see him sitting there, one leg out, one leg in, with a .38 revolver to his head. He was a drug dealer, and the cops had converged on his house, and he was in the window. I'm going to kill myself. Get the fuck out of here, everybody, leave. And they called me, the EAP. I stuck my head around the corner. Hey, I'm trying to talk to him. And when I said to him, do you have children? Do you have any kids? And he kept telling me, get that fuck out of here. I'll fucking do it. Finally, he said, yes, I got 2 kids. Why do you give a shit? And I said, I'm just telling you. And I gave him that stat. Mm-hmm. And, he thought for a few seconds, and he threw the gun out. And that was it. He got the help he needed. He got arrested, but he got the help he needed as
Sure.
well. But the bottom line is, you know what? That rang true for him in that situation. So it made me realize this is a powerful tool, and I use it in my own practice, and it's true.
Right.
I've written articles on suicide. I myself and one of my fellow therapists in my office wrote an article, and we got a saying. I don't know where the saying originated from, but it said, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that is such a true statement, because when I look back now and I see the children I have and where they're at in the family I've had over the years, I realize how much they would have missed, and who would not have been here. My youngest wouldn't have been here. My son was just a young little, he was 8 months old. My oldest daughter would have been fatherless. So you know what? Suicide's not the answer.
Yeah. And it'll affect generations too, because your dad's not there, or your mom, or whoever that person might be that is thinking about doing this act, and it's going to affect them mentally. It's going to affect them physically. They're going to have a hard time growing up. They're going to be guilty. They're going to have guilt that maybe it was them. It's just this crazy, insane kind of roller coaster that you would put people on, and like you said earlier, Tom, you can get off the ride anytime you want.
Yeah, and here's the thing I want, I guess, any listeners to know is oftentimes, when we're talking about intervention for myself or Sweets, we use that term intervention, and a lot of times now in our current society that we live in with the television show, things like that, people think that they have to have it look a certain way before someone gets help or someone's intervened. And that's when I say, it doesn't have to be, people are oftentimes, we compare, like, well, I've got a good job though, or I've got the support of my unit, or, or things like that. And it's when I say you can get off that emotional roller coaster, there's a great colleague and friend of mine. She's internationally known as a trauma therapist. Her name is Judy Crane.
Mm-hmm. And Judy's great.
Yeah, I know you love her and know her. Anyway, Judy has introduced me to this term, and it's not a clinical one. It's just, remember the monkey bars? It's monkey bars, right? As a kid, when you went through them, you didn't let go of the last one till you had a firm grip on the next one. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes our, not just first responders, but people in general, we can get really good at monkey barring. What I mean by that is we reach for alcohol, and then maybe it's Xanax or something for the anxiety, or a sleeping pill, or something like that, and then we swing from that to maybe it is the infidelities, or swinging from that to gambling a little bit. And then, and we let go of them as soon as, like, that social or legal, they become typically problematic in our relationships, right? The girlfriend or the wife says, hey, you got to stop. We're running out of bills or money. We need to pay our bills, things like that. Okay, so we rein that in for a while, but then it quickly transitions. So it hides out a lot of times, all the ways in which we're trying to numb out. Mm-hmm. But regardless, all of it cumulatively, when we look at it, it's so exhausting and it's so overwhelming. Yeah, right. Oh. And what I know is this, and this is probably, if I can say one statement, it's like for our first responders is they struggle with, we can't save face and cover your ass at the same time, guys.
Yep.
You got to pick one.
That's right.
And so if you're losing your ass, let's just give it up and not worry about saving face.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
Right, there's plenty of people out there that want to help you, believe me.
Yeah.
The statement that I heard earlier that I think you guys have been reinforcing throughout this whole episode is that it's okay not to be okay.
Yes.
Right.
And even if it's just a little bit from the, the 1,000 paper cuts, it's compounded trauma. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to feel bad when you see something bad. It's okay to need to talk to somebody when something's happening.
Yep.
But that's let's go deeper into that statement. It's okay not to be okay, because what's going to happen is you're going to be okay eventually. you're going to be okay again. But you're not going to be okay if you don't say that you have a problem, or if you don't recognize that you're not okay, because that'll keep going. So it's a temporary problem. That not okay is a temporary problem. It's not weakness. A lot of us look at it as weakness. It's not weakness. Right. It's just a temporary problem that then you're going to be okay again, And there's and we're all in recovery here, and there's times that we're not okay, all of us here, and we ask for help. We talk about things, and we work things out. So guys, that's a great show. Real quick, I want to recognize one of our first badges. Mike got me a little Lowell pin, and we're gonna figure out, we're gonna put it up here. So it's from the Lowell Police Department. It's a little badge, and I got more at home. I just forgot to bring them, and the next couple shows we will start talking about them, and send them in if you can. Get us on our email. It's all in the show notes. So
certainly is.
Well, good show, guys.
Yep, Friends in Recovery podcast. Answering the call. That's
it.
Join us for further episodes by subscribing, and help us spread the word by sharing across social media. And, of course, a special thank you to our sponsor, Genesis House, for making this possible, along with our producer, Sweets and Sweet Studio, for recording and broadcasting the podcast. It's been a long day, and I'm sorry my eyes aren't what they used to be. But I want to thank Tom as well, Tom Burruel, for being here today.
Yeah, Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate this, having me back again.
Tom's got a great voice for radio.
He does. Yeah, give us your baseball voice again.
And now batting for the Crusaders.
We got to have fun too, guys. Listen, it's about it's a balance of life. So, and if you have any questions, or you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you want to submit a question or a topic for discussion, please visit our Facebook page, and that's, of course, Answering the Call, the First Responders Podcast, or you can send an email to us at help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com, and that's one of the best ways to get a hold of us.
Absolutely. And as always, we are grateful for the privilege to share our stories and insight with you, the listener.
And we're going to teach Mike that you have to speak into the mic.
Speak into the mic.
Father.
Mike needs to speak into the mic.
The Podfather.
The Podfather. We'll get it one day. Stay safe, everybody.
All right. Thanks.
That concludes this episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House for sponsoring the show and supporting our first responders who are struggling with addiction and mental health. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates. If you are interested in becoming a guest on the show, email us at help@friendsinrecoverypodcast.com.